A lot of people think the big question with artificial intelligence is whether governments can regulate it fast enough. I do not think that is actually the first question. The first question is simpler and more immediate. While governments are still figuring it out, who is already making the rules? Because the rules are being written right now, and not always by lawmakers. They are often written by companies, platforms, school administrators, compliance teams, software defaults, insurers, hospitals, and employers. Long before a formal law reaches your life, a policy usually does. And once you see that, the whole conversation changes. Most people imagine a gap. Technology moves fast. Institutions move slowly. And for a while, there are no rules. That sounds reasonable, but real systems do not leave gaps empty for long. When something powerful starts affecting work, education, healthcare, media, hiring, or money, somebody has to decide what is allowed, what is restricted, what counts as acceptable use, and what happens when something goes wrong. A rule vacuum is never really empty. It gets filled by whoever is closest to the problem and powerful enough to decide. That is what is happening with artificial intelligence right now. Think about a school trying to decide whether students can use artificial intelligence for homework, or a hospital deciding what tools can touch patient information. Think about a company deciding which systems employees are allowed to use and which ones are blocked, or a platform deciding what content gets surfaced, labeled, or suppressed. Think about an insurer deciding what qualifies as acceptable decision support, or a hiring system quietly shaping who gets filtered in and who gets filtered out. Those are rules. Even if they do not look like laws, you may never vote on them, and you may not even know they exist. But they still shape what people are allowed to do, what gets normalized, and who absorbs the risk when something breaks. That is why this matters more than it first sounds. The issue is not just speed. The issue is legitimacy, visibility, and incentives. Who benefits from the rule? Who gets protected? Who gets excluded? Who has a way to challenge the decision? And who even knows the rule exists in the first place? When people say there are no rules for this yet, what they often really mean is that the formal public rules are still catching up. In everyday life, though, that does not mean the space is ungoverned. It means governance is already happening in a more fragmented and less visible way. And that can be more consequential than people realize. The rules that shape your life do not have to arrive through a major law to matter. They can arrive through a usage policy, a software setting, a procurement decision, a risk review, a school handbook, a terms of service update, or a quiet internal decision by somebody whose name you will never know. When rules are set quietly, they can still reshape your options very loudly. There are 3 ways this tends to go wrong. The first is invisible rulemaking. People are affected by decisions they cannot clearly see. They do not know what standard is being applied, what data is being used, what behavior is allowed, or what triggered the outcome. They just feel the effect. A tool is unavailable. A submission is rejected. An account is flagged. An application is filtered. A workflow is blocked. Something changed, but the rule itself remains blurry. The second failure mode is rules written for speed, not wisdom. The fastest actor often writes the first rule, and that is understandable because when a new technology lands, people have to make operational decisions quickly. The problem is that speed does not guarantee fairness, good judgment, or long-term thinking. A company policy written in a rush can become the default standard for thousands of people, and a platform setting can steer behavior at scale before anyone has really debated whether it should. The third failure mode is private decisions hardening into public reality. Something begins as a local policy or a product choice, and then other organizations copy it. Risk teams borrow from one another. Schools imitate each other. Employers follow what seems safest. Vendors build around whatever the earliest large customers demanded. Before long, a private choice starts functioning like a public rule, even though nobody ever had a real public conversation about whether it should. That is the power shift most people are missing. The future of artificial intelligence is not only being shaped by breakthroughs in the technology, it is also being shaped by quiet decisions about what counts as normal, what gets treated as risky, what is allowed into institutions, and who gets to decide under uncertainty. To be fair, not all private rulemaking is bad. In fast-moving environments, waiting for perfect legislation before doing anything would be a disaster. Schools do need policies. Hospitals do need safeguards. Companies do need standards. Platforms do need operating rules. The world cannot pause until every legislature and regulatory body finishes debating the ideal framework. So the answer is not to freeze innovation until perfect rules exist. The answer is to make rule-making more visible, more accountable, and easier to question. Good governance in a fast-moving environment does not mean pretending we already know the final answer. It means the rules are explicit, the reasoning behind them is visible. There is some path to revise them. The people affected by them can at least see what is shaping their options, and the rules can adapt as the technology changes instead of hardening too early around bad assumptions. In a fast-moving environment, the goal is not perfect rules. It is rules you can see, question, and improve. That is the practical lens I think more people need. The next time you hear someone say, "There are no rules for this yet," ask a better question. Who is already deciding how this gets used and on what authority? That one question changes everything because it forces you to look for the policy behind the product, the default behind the workflow, the administrator behind the boundary, and the incentive behind the standard. It helps you see that power is often exercised long before it is formally announced. Once you see that, you stop imagining the future of artificial intelligence as something that will someday be governed. You realize it is being governed already, quietly, unevenly, and often invisibly. The real question is whether we will notice who is writing the rules before those rules start feeling natural, inevitable, and too established to challenge. Because if institutions cannot keep up, the rules will still get written. The real question is who decides. Where do you think artificial intelligence rules are already being written quietly in everyday life?